You're listening to Scary Sleep Stories presents The Dark Hours.
Welcome, guys. I know a lot of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before you drift off like the video, subscribe if you're new, and comment what time it is right now. Let's see who's still awake and who's not alone tonight. Let's begin.
I felt a familiar mix of excitement and apprehension. The chain-link fence surrounding the property was rusted and bent, easy enough to slip through. We made our way across the overgrown parking lot, our footsteps crunching on broken glass and gravel. "This place is creepy as hell," Lizzie whispered, her camera already out and snapping pictures. "That's the point, isn't it?" Mike grinned, but I could see he was a bit on edge too. We found a side door that was hanging off its hinges and slipped inside. The interior was dark and musty, years of dust and decay filling our nostrils. Beams of sunlight streamed through holes in the roof, illuminating dancing motes of dust. "Let's split up," Tom suggested. "We'll cover more ground that way." I wasn't too keen on the idea, but everyone else seemed excited about it. We agreed to meet back at the entrance in an hour and set off in different directions. I made my way deeper into the factory, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The place was a maze of rusted machinery and collapsed shelving. Every step echoed ominously, and more than once I spooked myself with my own reflection in a grimy window. I was in what looked like an old office area when I heard it. A shuffle of movement, too heavy to be a rat or other small animal. I froze, my heart suddenly pounding. "Guys?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vast space. No answer. I turned slowly, sweeping my flashlight around the room. Nothing seemed out of place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That's when I saw it. A shadow, moving quickly past a doorway at the end of the hall. It was too big to be any of my friends. Fear gripped me, but curiosity won out. I moved towards the doorway, every nerve on high alert. As I reached the threshold, I heard voices. Low, rough whispers that definitely didn't belong to any of my friends. I peered around the corner and my blood ran cold. In what must have been the factory's main floor, I saw 3 men. They were gathered around a collection of crates, passing packages between them. Even from a distance, I knew what I was seeing. This was a drug deal. I must have made a noise, a gasp or a shifting of my feet, because suddenly one of the men looked up. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then all hell broke loose. "Hey!" the man shouted, reaching for something at his waist. I didn't wait to see what it was. I turned and ran. I could hear shouts and footsteps behind me as I tore through the factory. My mind was racing. I needed to find my friends, to warn them. We needed to get out of here now. I rounded a corner and slammed right into Tom. We both went down in a tangle of limbs. "Jake! What the hell, man?" Tom groaned, rubbing his head. "No time!" I gasped, scrambling to my feet. "We need to go. Now. Where are the others?" The urgency in my voice must have gotten through to him, because he didn't ask any more questions. "Sarah's just down there." He pointed. "I don't know where Mike and Lizzie went." We found Sarah quickly, and I gave them a rushed explanation as we moved. Their eyes widened in fear as they realized the danger we were in. "We need to find Mike and Lizzie," Sarah said, her voice shaking. I nodded, but before we could decide on a plan, we heard a scream. It was Lizzie. We ran towards the sound, caution forgotten in our desperation to reach our friend. We burst into a large room and saw Lizzie backed into a corner, one of the men advancing on her. Mike was on the ground, not moving. Without thinking, I grabbed a piece of rusted pipe from the ground and charged. I caught the man by surprise, swinging the pipe and connecting with his shoulder. He went down with a yell of pain. "Run!" I shouted at Lizzie. She didn't need to be told twice. Tom was checking on Mike. "He's breathing," he reported. "I think he's just knocked out." The man I'd hit was getting to his feet, murder in his eyes. Behind him, I could see his 2 companions entering the room. "You kids picked the wrong place to play explorer," one of them growled. We were trapped. The only exit was behind the men, and they were blocking our path. My mind raced, trying to find a way out of this nightmare. That's when I saw it. A conveyor belt, leading up to a higher level. If we could get up there, maybe we could find another way out. "The belt," I hissed to Tom. "We need to get up there." He nodded, understanding immediately. "On 3, he whispered. 1, 2, 3. We moved as one. Tom and I grabbed Mike under the arms and ran for the conveyor belt. Sarah and Lizzie were right behind us. The men, caught off guard by our sudden movement, took a second to react. But that second was all we needed. We scrambled up the rusted conveyor belt, the sharp edges cutting into our hands. I could hear the men shouting, their footsteps pounding as they gave chase. We reached the upper level and found ourselves in a maze of catwalks and suspended walkways. The factory stretched out below us, a labyrinth of shadows and rusted metal. "Which way?" Sarah panted. I looked around frantically. "There!" I pointed to a door on the far side of the room. It was marked with a faded "exit" sign. We ran across the catwalks, the whole structure shaking under our feet. Behind us, I could hear the men climbing up after us. We reached the door and I yanked it open, revealing a rusted fire escape. Without hesitation, we started down. We were about halfway down when I heard a gunshot. The sound echoed through the factory, making us all flinch. "Keep moving," I shouted. We practically fell down the last few flights, our feet clanging on the metal steps. As soon as we hit the ground, we ran. We didn't stop running until we reached Tom's car, parked a few blocks away. We piled in, Mike still groggy but conscious now, and Tom peeled out of there like the devil himself was chasing us. It wasn't until we were miles away, the factory long out of sight, that we finally allowed ourselves to breathe. What just happened?" Lizzie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I told them everything I had seen, about the drug deal and the chase. As I spoke, the reality of what we'd just been through began to sink in. We debated about whether to go to the police, but fear won out. What if those men had connections? What if they came after us or our families? In the end, we made a pact to never speak of what happened to anyone. That day changed us all. We'd gone looking for a thrill and found terror instead. The nightmares lasted for weeks, months for some of us. Every unexpected noise made us jump, every stranger on the street a potential threat. But it also brought us closer together. We'd face death and come out the other side. That kind of experience bonds you in ways nothing else can. We never went urban exploring again after that. The thrill wasn't worth the risk. But sometimes, when I pass an abandoned building, I can't help but wonder what secrets it might be hiding, and I shudder, remembering the day our curiosity almost got us killed. The Millbrook factory still stands, as far as I know, a decaying monument to a dying industry, and a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in forgotten places. If you ever find yourself tempted to explore such a place, remember our story. Sometimes, the real monsters aren't the ghosts of the past, but the very real dangers of the present. The flickering fluorescent light above me buzzed like an angry insect, casting an eerie glow over the empty corridors. It was just another quiet night at Oak Ridge office complex, or so I thought. Little did I know that in a matter of hours, I'd be fighting for my life, trapped in a place I once considered mundane and safe. My name's Carlos, and I've been the night janitor at Oak Ridge for the past 5 years. It's not a glamorous job, but it pays the bills and lets me work on my novels during the quiet hours. I know every nook and cranny of this place, from the CEO's corner office on the top floor to the musty supply closets in the basement. But on that fateful night, even my intimate knowledge of the building wouldn't be enough to keep me safe. It started like any other shift. I arrived at 10 p.m., just as the last of the workaholics were trudging out to their cars. I nodded to Marjorie from accounting as she passed, her arms full of files she was probably taking home to work on. She gave me a tired smile in return. "Another late night, Marjorie?" I asked, holding the door open for her. "You know how it is during tax season, Carlos," she sighed. "See you tomorrow." If only I'd known those might be the last words we'd ever exchange. I started my rounds on the top floor, working my way down. Vacuum the carpets, empty the trash, wipe down the surfaces. It was mindless work, leaving my imagination free to wander. I was deep in thought about the plot of my latest story when I heard it. A crash, followed by muffled cursing. I froze, my hand still on the handle of the vacuum cleaner. The sound had come from downstairs, maybe the 3rd or 4th floor. My first thought was that Marjorie had come back for something she'd forgotten, but Marjorie didn't curse like that. Cautiously, I made my way to the stairwell. The emergency lights cast long shadows as I descended, my heart pounding louder with each step. As I reached the 4th floor landing, I heard voices, low, urgent whispers that definitely didn't belong to anyone who should be in the building at this hour. I eased the door open just a crack, peering into the darkened office space. What I saw made my blood run cold. 3 men, dressed all in black, were methodically going through the desks and filing cabinets. They moved with purpose, clearly looking for something specific. One of them held a small flashlight, its beam dancing across the room as they searched. Intruders, thieves. And here I was, alone in the building with them. I let the door close silently, my mind racing. I needed to call the police, but my cell phone was in my locker in the basement. The landlines on this floor would be useless. The phone system automatically shut down after hours to prevent long-distance abuse. I had to get to the security office on the ground floor. It had a separate phone line and direct access to the police. As quietly as I could, I started down the stairs. I had just reached the 3rd floor when I heard the stairwell door above me open. They were coming down. Panic surged through me. I yanked open the 3rd floor door and ducked inside, praying they hadn't seen me. I could hear their footsteps echoing in the stairwell as they descended. "Check this floor," I heard one of them say. "We need to find those files." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it. I looked around frantically for a place to hide. The open office layout left few options, but then I spotted it, the supply closet. I darted across the room, wincing at every footfall that seemed to echo in the silence. I had just closed the closet door behind me when I heard them enter the floor, pressed against the back wall of the closet, surrounded by the smell of cleaning products and paper. I tried to steady my breathing. Through the slats in the door, I could see flashlight beams sweeping across the office. "Nothing here," one of them growled after what felt like an eternity. "Let's try the next floor." I waited until I couldn't hear their footsteps anymore before allowing myself to breathe normally. But I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to get to that security office. Easing the closet door open, I peered out into the darkness. The floor seemed empty. I crept towards the stairwell, every nerve on high alert. I had just reached the stairs when I heard a shout from above. "Hey, there's someone down there." They'd seen me. I ran. Taking the stairs 2 at a time, I flew down towards the ground floor. I could hear them behind me, their heavy footfalls echoing off the concrete walls. I burst out of the stairwell and into the main lobby. The security office was just across the atrium. I was halfway there when a figure stepped out in front of me. I skidded to a stop, nearly falling in my haste to change direction. The man lunged for me, but years of maneuvering around office furniture with my cleaning cart had made me nimble. I ducked under his grasp and sprinted for the elevators. I jabbed the call button repeatedly, knowing it was useless. The elevators were shut down for the night. But next to the elevators was a door marked "Maintenance." Beyond it, a ladder that led to the roof. I yanked the door open and started climbing, my arms burning with the effort. Above me, I could hear the maintenance door slam open again. They were following me up. I reached the roof access hatch and pushed it open, gulping in the cool night air as I pulled myself up onto the gravel-covered roof. Stars twinkled overhead. oblivious to the drama unfolding below them. I ran to the edge of the roof, looking for a way down. There was none. I was trapped. The hatch banged open behind me. I turned to see the 3 men climbing onto the roof, their faces twisted with anger and exertion. Nowhere to run now. One of them sneered, advancing towards me. I backed up until I felt the low wall at the edge of the roof against my legs. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but I won't say anything. Just let me go." The man in the lead, a tall, broad-shouldered figure with a scar running down his cheek, laughed. "Sorry, pal. Can't take that risk." He lunged at me. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. I saw his hand reaching for me, saw the malice in his eyes, and I made a decision. I vaulted over the low wall. For a heart-stopping moment, I was in free fall. Then my feet hit something solid, the window washing platform, left in place by the crew earlier that day. I heard shouts of surprise from above as I frantically worked the controls. The platform lurched into motion, slowly descending the side of the building. But I wasn't safe yet. I could see one of the men leaning over the edge of the roof, taking aim with what looked like a gun. I pressed myself against the side of the building as the first shot pinged off the metal platform. The second shot shattered one of the support cables. The platform tipped dangerously, and I had to grab onto the railing to keep from falling. I was still 4 stories up, too high to jump. That's when I saw it. A window left open on the 3rd floor. It was a long shot, but it was my only chance. As the platform swung wildly, I timed my move. 1 second, 2, 3, I leapt. For a moment, I thought I'd miscalculated. Then my hands caught the windowsill. Pain shot through my arms as I hauled myself inside, collapsing onto the floor of an empty office. I didn't allow myself a moment to rest. I could hear commotion in the stairwell. They were coming down after me. I ran for the elevators. They were still powered down, but there was an emergency phone inside. I wrenched open the doors and grabbed the phone. 911, what's your emergency? I've never been so glad to hear those words in my life. The next few minutes were a blur. I stayed on the phone with the dispatcher, hidden in the elevator, until I heard the beautiful sound of police sirens approaching. The would-be thieves were caught trying to flee the building. It turned out they were after confidential client information. Information that could have ruined lives if it had fallen into the wrong hands. As I sat in the back of an ambulance, a shock blanket around my shoulders, I watched the men being led away in handcuffs. One of them, the scarred leader, caught my eye as he was put into a police car. The look he gave me sent chills down my spine. I gave my statement to the police, then went home to my worried wife and sleeping kids. As I hugged them tight, I realized how close I'd come to never seeing them again. I don't work nights anymore. The company offered me a day position with better pay, partially out of gratitude, partially out of guilt for the lax security that had put me in danger. Sometimes, when I'm leaving the office in the evening and I see the night janitor starting his shift, I feel a pang of something. Fear, sympathy, I'm not sure. I want to warn him, to tell him to be careful, to always be on guard. But I don't. I just nod and smile, and hope that his nights will be quieter than mine were. And as I drive home, I'm grateful for the mundane, for the ordinary, because I know now how quickly it can all change, how thin the line is between routine and terror, and I never, ever take an uneventful night for granted again. The soft glow of the TV flickered in the darkened living room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Little Timmy had been asleep for hours, and I was settling in for a quiet night of babysitting. But as I absent-mindedly scrolled through my phone, a message popped up that made my blood run cold. In that moment, I realized this ordinary suburban home had become the stage for a terrifying game of cat and mouse. My name's Amy, and I've been babysitting for the Johnsons for about 6 months now. They're good people with a sweet kid, and the gig helps pay for my college textbooks. It was supposed to be just another Friday night job, but it turned into the most horrifying experience of my life. The evening had started normally enough. I arrived at 7 p.m., just as Mr. and Mrs. Johnson were heading out for their date night. Timmy, their 8-year-old son, was already in his pajamas, eager to show me his latest Lego creation. "Now, Amy," Mrs. Johnson said as she put on her earrings, "Timmy's allowed 1 hour of tablet time before bed. The parental controls are on, so he should only be able to access his games and approved websites." I nodded, having heard this spiel before. "No worries, Mrs. Johnson. We'll be fine." If only I'd known how wrong I was. After the Johnsons left, Timmy and I had dinner. He chatted excitedly about school and his friends, and I listened with half an ear, smiling and nodding at the right moments. Around 8 p.m., I handed him his tablet for his allotted screen time. "Remember, just 1 hour, buddy," I said. "Then it's bedtime." Timmy nodded, already engrossed in whatever game he was playing. I settled onto the couch with my own phone, scrolling through social media and texting friends. At 9 p.m., I told Timmy it was time for bed. He grumbled a bit but handed over the tablet without too much fuss. As I tucked him in, he seemed a little quieter than usual. "Everything okay, Timmy?" I asked. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Amy, is it okay to have secret friends?" Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. "What do you mean by secret friends, Timmy?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Just someone I talk to sometimes, but it's a secret." Alarm bells started ringing in my head. "Timmy, who is this secret friend? How do you talk to them?" But Timmy had clammed up. He rolled over, pulling the covers up to his chin. "Never mind. Good night, Amy." I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should I press him for more information? Call his parents? In the end, I decided to check the tablet first. Maybe I was overreacting. Back in the living room, I unlocked the tablet. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Just the usual games and child-friendly apps. But then I noticed an app I didn't recognize. It looked like a harmless puzzle game, with a colorful icon of interlocking blocks. When I opened it, my heart dropped. It wasn't a game at all, but a messaging app. And there, in the chat history, was a conversation that made my skin crawl. The messages were from someone calling themselves Game Master Mike. At first, they seemed innocent enough, talking about games and school. But as I scrolled, the tone changed. "Remember, Timmy, this is our secret. Don't tell your parents or your babysitter. I can't wait to meet you in person. It'll be so much fun. I'll be coming to see you very soon, maybe even tonight." My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the tablet. This wasn't just some online predator grooming a child from afar. This Mike was planning to come here. Tonight. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, when a message popped up on the screen. It was from an unknown number. "Hello, Amy. Timmy's asleep now, isn't he? Why don't you let me in so we can surprise him?" Terror washed over me in an icy wave. He was here, outside the house, watching. I ran to the windows, making sure they were all locked. I could see nothing but darkness outside, but I felt exposed, vulnerable. I quickly drew all the curtains. My mind was racing. I needed to call the police, but what if he heard me? What if he decided to break in before help could arrive? Another message pinged on my phone. "Come on, Amy, don't be rude. I've come all this way." I muted my phone, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I had to protect Timmy. I had to think. I crept upstairs, wincing at every creak of the floorboards. Timmy was still asleep, blissfully unaware of the danger. I gently shook him awake. "Timmy," I whispered, trying to keep my voice calm. "We need to play a game. It's called hide and seek, but we have to be very, very quiet. Okay?" Timmy nodded, still half asleep. I led him to his parents' room, to the walk-in closet I knew was there. "You hide in here," I said, pushing aside hanging clothes to reveal a small space at the back. "Don't come out until I come get you, no matter what you hear. Okay? It's very important." Timmy nodded again, his eyes wide. He could sense my fear, I think, even if he didn't understand it. I closed the closet door, then the bedroom door, hoping it would be enough to keep him safe. Back downstairs, I grabbed the largest knife from the kitchen. It felt awkward and heavy in my hand, but it was better than nothing. Another message on my phone. "I'm getting impatient, Amy. Maybe I'll just let myself in." I heard a noise from the back of the house, the sound of the patio door sliding open. He was inside. I pressed myself against the wall next to the kitchen doorway, knife raised, barely daring to breathe. I could hear footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving through the house. "Timmy," a man's voice called softly. "It's me, Game Master Mike. I've come to play." The footsteps were getting closer. I could see a shadow approaching the kitchen doorway. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. I saw a hand appear around the doorframe, then an arm, then a shoulder. Without thinking, I swung the knife. There was a yell of pain and surprise. The man stumbled back, clutching his arm where I'd slashed him. He was tall, heavy-set, with a scraggly beard and wild eyes. Nothing like the friendly persona he'd created online. "You little bitch," he snarled, lunging at me. I dodged, but he was faster than I expected. He grabbed my wrist, squeezing until I dropped the knife. It clattered to the floor. We grappled, his strength overwhelming me. He slammed me against the wall, knocking the wind out of me. His hand found my throat, squeezing. "Where is he?" he growled. "Where's Timmy?" I clawed at his hand, gasping for air. Black spots were dancing at the edges of my vision. This was it, I thought. I was going to die. Then, through the roaring in my ears, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Police sirens. The man's grip loosened in surprise, and I took my chance. I brought my knee up hard, catching him in the groin. He doubled over with a grunt of pain, and I shoved past him. I ran for the front door, yanking it open just as a police car screeched to a halt in the driveway. "Help!" I screamed. "He's inside!" The next few minutes were a blur. Police officers swarmed the house. The man, whose real name, I later learned, was Gerald Hoffman, was tackled trying to escape through the back door. Timmy was found safe in the closet, scared but unharmed. As I sat in the back of an ambulance answering a detective's questions, I watched them lead Hoffman away in handcuffs. He caught my eye as they put him in the police car, and the look he gave me was pure hatred. I shuddered, knowing that if the police hadn't arrived when they did, things could have ended very differently. It turned out that one of the neighbors had seen a strange man lurking around the house and called the police. I've never been so grateful for nosy neighbors in my life. The Johnsons arrived home to a scene of chaos, police cars, an ambulance, their house a crime scene. They were horrified by what had almost happened, and incredibly grateful that I had protected Timmy. In the days that followed, as the story hit the local news, I was hailed as a hero. But I didn't feel like one. I felt scared, violated, and angry. Angry at Hoffman for preying on an innocent child. Angry at myself for not realizing sooner what was happening. Angry at the world for being a place where such monsters exist. I don't babysit anymore. The trauma of that night left scars that are still healing. But I did start volunteering for an organization that teaches kids about online safety. If I can prevent even one child from going through what Timmy almost did, maybe some good can come from that terrifying night. Every time I pass the Johnsons' house, I remember the fear, the adrenaline, the moment I thought it was all over. But I also remember that I survived, that I protected Timmy. And I know that no matter how dark the world can be, there's always hope as long as there are people willing to stand up to the darkness. The acrid smell of chemicals burned my nostrils as I crouched behind a fallen tree. my heart pounding so hard I was sure it would give away my position. What had started as a peaceful hiking trip had turned into a desperate fight for survival. I never imagined that stumbling upon a hidden meth lab deep in the woods would put me and my friends in mortal danger. But here we were, being hunted like animals in a forest that had suddenly become our prison. My name's Alex, and I've always loved the outdoors. So when my friends Jake and Sarah suggested a weekend hiking trip in the Ozarks, I jumped at the chance. We were all experienced hikers, confident in our ability to handle whatever nature threw our way. But nature, as it turned out, wasn't the threat we needed to worry about. We set out early Friday morning, the air crisp and filled with the promise of adventure. The trail we'd chosen was off the beaten path, recommended by a local guide as a challenging but rewarding trek. For the first day and a half, it was exactly that. We navigated steep inclines, crossed babbling streams, and marveled at the lush canopy above us. It was late Saturday afternoon when things took a turn. We had veered slightly off the marked trail, following what looked like a game path in search of a good spot to set up camp for the night. "Guys, do you smell that?" Sarah asked, wrinkling her nose. I sniffed the air. There was definitely an odd odor, sharp and chemical. It reminded me of the time I'd accidentally left a can of paint thinner open in my garage. "Maybe there's a factory nearby?" Jake suggested, but he sounded uncertain. We should have turned back then. But curiosity got the better of us. We pressed on, following the strengthening scent. As we pushed through a dense thicket, the trees suddenly opened up into a small clearing. What we saw made us freeze in our tracks. In the middle of the clearing stood a dilapidated cabin. But it wasn't the building that caught our attention. It was the collection of equipment scattered around it. Plastic containers, tubing, propane tanks, and other paraphernalia that I'd only ever seen on crime shows. "Holy shit," Jake whispered. "Is that what I think it is?" Before either Sarah or I could respond, we heard voices. Rough, angry voices coming from inside the cabin. "Get down," I hissed, dropping to the ground behind a fallen log. Jake and Sarah followed suit, our bodies pressed into the damp earth. Through a gap in the log, I could see two men emerge from the cabin. They were arguing about something. Supplies, I think. They looked nothing like the stereotypical meth cooks I'd seen on TV. These guys were burly, with hard eyes and clothes that had seen better days, and they were armed. "We need to get out of here," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, slowly starting to back away. But as I moved, my backpack caught on a branch. The resulting snap seemed to echo through the clearing. The men's heads whipped in our direction. "What was that?" one of them growled. "Probably just an animal," the other replied, but he didn't sound convinced. We lay there, barely breathing, praying they wouldn't investigate further. For a moment, it seemed like luck was on our side. The men turned back to their conversation. Then Jake sneezed. It wasn't loud, but in the tense silence, it might as well have been a gunshot. "There's someone out there," one of the men shouted. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. We scrambled to our feet and ran, crashing through the underbrush with no regard for stealth. Behind us, I could hear shouts and the sound of pursuit. "Split up!" I yelled to Jake and Sarah. "Meet back at the car if you can." It was a risky move, but I hoped it would confuse our pursuers. I veered left, while Jake and Sarah went right. I ran like I'd never run before, branches whipping at my face, roots threatening to trip me with every step. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead, but fear kept me going. I could hear someone behind me, gaining ground. I risked a glance over my shoulder and saw one of the men, his face twisted with rage, not 20 yards behind me. In my moment of distraction, my foot caught on a root. I went down hard, tumbling down a small incline. Pain shot through my ankle as I tried to get up. "Got you now, you little bastard," the man snarled, emerging from the trees above me. In desperation, I grabbed a handful of dirt and leaves and threw it at his face. He cursed, momentarily blinded, and I used that moment to stumble to my feet and keep running. The pain in my ankle was excruciating, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I had no idea where I was going, no plan beyond getaway. As I ran, the forest seemed to close in around me. The trees were denser here, the undergrowth thicker. It was getting darker too, the sun setting behind the mountains. I don't know how long I ran. It could have been minutes or hours. Every sound made me flinch. Was it my pursuer, or just the natural noises of the forest? Finally, when I felt I couldn't take another step, I saw it. A small cave, half hidden by a curtain of vines. Without hesitation, I dove inside. The cave was shallow, more of an overhang really, but it was enough. I pressed myself against the back wall, trying to quiet my ragged breathing. Outside, I could hear movement. Heavy footsteps, branches snapping. He was close. "I know you're around here somewhere," the man called out. His voice was closer than I expected, and I had to stifle a gasp. I closed my eyes, willing myself to become invisible. The footsteps drew nearer, then paused right outside my hiding spot. For a moment that felt like an eternity. There was silence. I didn't dare breathe. Then, mercifully, the footsteps started to move away. I waited until I could no longer hear any sound before allowing myself to relax slightly, but I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to find Jake and Sarah, had to get help. As quietly as I could, I eased myself out of the cave. The forest was dark now, the trees casting long shadows in the fading light. I had no idea which direction to go, but I knew I couldn't go back the way I'd come. I picked a direction and started walking, trying to favor my injured ankle. Every snapping twig made me jump. Every rustling leaf had me looking over my shoulder. After what felt like hours of aimless wandering, I heard something that made my heart leap, the sound of running water. A stream. And if I could find the stream, I might be able to find my way back to the trail. I followed the sound, hope giving me renewed energy. As I pushed through a dense patch of undergrowth, I suddenly found myself face to face with Sarah. We both stifled screams of surprise, then hugged each other fiercely. "Oh my God, Alex," Sarah whispered. I didn't know if..." "I'm okay," I assured her, though okay was a relative term at this point. "Have you seen Jake?" She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "We got separated. I've been hiding, trying to figure out what to do." Together, we decided to follow the stream. It had to lead somewhere, and it was our best chance of finding our way out of this nightmare. We walked through the night, jumping at every sound, expecting to see one of our pursuers behind every tree. As dawn broke, we finally heard something that filled us with relief and dread in equal measure, the distant sound of vehicles. Cautiously, we approached the sound. Through the trees, we could see a road, and on that road, a welcome sight, police cars. It turned out that Jake had managed to find his way back to our car and had immediately driven to the nearest town to get help. The police had been searching for us all night. As we were escorted to safety, I looked back at the forest. Somewhere in there were dangerous men and their illegal operation, but they'd be found soon enough. Our ordeal had ensured that the aftermath was a blur of police statements and medical checks. The meth lab was raided, the men arrested. We were hailed as heroes by the local media. Though it certainly didn't feel heroic at the time, it took a long time for the nightmares to stop, for me to be able to hear a twig snap without flinching. But eventually, I found my way back to the trails. The forest, once a place of peace and adventure, had shown me its darker side, but it had also shown me my own strength, my will to survive. Now, when I hike, I carry with me the knowledge that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places, but I also carry the certainty that I can face that danger and overcome it. The forest may hide secrets, some of them deadly, but it can't hide the human spirit's capacity for survival. The golden light of sunset painted the forest in warm hues, but a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. As I peered through my camera's viewfinder, I caught a glimpse of something that shouldn't be there. a pair of gleaming eyes watching me from the shadows. In that moment, I realized I had become the prey, and the hunter was unlike anything I had ever encountered before. My name is Jack, and I'm a wildlife photographer. I've spent years tracking and photographing some of the most elusive creatures on the planet. From the snow leopards of the Himalayas to the jaguars of the Amazon, I thought I'd seen it all, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to face in the remote wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. I'd come to this particular stretch of old-growth forest following rumors of an undocumented species. Local tribes spoke of a creature that walked on two legs but was covered in fur, with eyes that glowed in the dark. Most dismissed it as folklore, but I've learned over the years that legends often have a kernel of truth. For days, I'd been setting up camera traps and staking out promising locations. I'd seen nothing but the usual wildlife: deer, elk, the occasional black bear. But as the sun began to set on my 5th day in the forest, everything changed. I was perched in a tree blind, my camera ready, watching a small clearing where I'd noticed unusual tracks earlier. The light was fading fast, and I was considering packing up for the night when I heard it. A low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My heart rate spiked, but years of experience kept me still. I raised my camera, scanning the tree line through my telephoto lens. That's when I saw them, two eyes reflecting the last rays of sunlight, set in a face that was almost but not quite human. I snapped a series of shots instinctively, the camera's shutter sounding unnaturally loud in the hushed forest. As soon as I lowered the camera, the eyes were gone, but I could still feel its presence, watching, waiting. With trembling hands, I checked the photos I'd just taken. Most were blurry, useless, but one, the last one, was crystal clear. What I saw made my blood run cold. The face was ape-like, but with an intelligence in its eyes that was undeniably sentient. This was no known animal. This was something else entirely. As darkness fell, I knew I had to get out of there. Whatever this creature was, it was clearly aware of me, and I didn't want to find out if it was as curious about me as I was about it. I began to pack up my gear as quietly as possible, all too aware of the rustling sounds coming from the underbrush around me. Just as I was about to descend from my perch, a blood-curdling screech pierced the night. It was close, too close. I froze, one hand on the tree trunk, the other clutching my camera bag. The forest had gone deathly quiet, as if every living thing was holding its breath. Then I heard it, the sound of something large moving through the forest, heading straight for my tree. Panic surged through me. I'd dealt with charging elephants and stalking tigers, but always from a safe distance or with guides nearby. Here, I was alone, and whatever was coming was unlike anything in my experience. I scrambled down the tree, no longer caring about stealth. As soon as my feet hit the ground, I ran. I had no plan, no direction in mind. Pure instinct drove me forward, crashing through undergrowth, leaping over fallen logs. Behind me, I could hear it pursuing. The creature moved with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional snap of a branch or rustle of leaves. It was toying with me, I realized with growing horror. It could have caught me at any time, but it was drawing out the chase. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like lead, but terror kept me moving. In the darkness, I could barely see where I was going. Branches whipped at my face. Roots threatened to trip me with every step. But I didn't dare slow down. Suddenly, the ground disappeared from beneath my feet. I plunged forward, tumbling down a steep embankment. Pain shot through my body as I rolled, unable to stop my descent. When I finally came to a stop, I lay there for a moment, dazed and winded. The sound of rushing water filled my ears. I had landed near a river. As I struggled to my feet, wincing at the pain in my ankle, an idea struck me. The creature, whatever it was, seemed to rely heavily on scent. If I could cross the river, I might be able to throw it off my trail. I limped towards the sound of water, my eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness. The river loomed before me, a black ribbon cutting through the forest. It was wide and fast-moving, far more dangerous than I had hoped. But I could hear movement in the forest behind me. I was out of options. Taking a deep breath, I waded in. The icy water took my breath away, but I pushed forward. The current tugged at my legs, threatening to sweep me away. By the time I reached the middle, the water was up to my chest. My camera bag felt like it weighed a ton, dragging me down. Just as I thought I wouldn't make it, my feet found purchase on the other side. I dragged myself onto the bank, soaked and shivering. But I couldn't rest yet. I had to put more distance between myself and whatever was chasing me. I stumbled through the forest, my wet clothes clinging to me, my teeth chattering. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every sound a potential pursuer. But gradually, I realized I couldn't hear anything following me anymore. As the adrenaline began to wear off, exhaustion set in. I needed to find shelter, to rest, and try to figure out where I was. In the dim pre-dawn light, I spotted a large, hollow log. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. I crawled inside, curling up as best I could. As I lay there, shivering and aching, I thought about the photos in my camera. If I had managed to capture what I thought I had, it would change everything. But at what cost? Was any discovery worth this terror? I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the gaps in the log. For a moment, I was disoriented. Then the memories of the night before came flooding back. Cautiously, I peeked out of my hiding place. The forest looked different in the daylight, less menacing, more familiar. But I knew appearances could be deceiving. Whatever had chased me last night could still be out there. I checked my GPS unit, relieved to find it had survived the river crossing. I was about 5 miles from my campsite. It would be a tough hike with my injured ankle, but I had no choice. I needed to get back to civilization, to show someone the photos I had taken. The journey back was a blur of pain and paranoia. Every snapping twig made me flinch. Every rustling leaf had me looking over my shoulder. But nothing appeared. No glowing eyes, no inhuman shrieks, just the normal sounds of a forest going about its day. When I finally stumbled into my campsite, I almost wept with relief. My tent was still there, untouched. I quickly packed up, my hands shaking with exhaustion and lingering fear. I needed to get out of these woods, back to my car, back to safety. The hike to the trailhead was the longest 2 miles of my life. When I finally saw my beat-up Land Rover, I could have kissed it. I threw my gear in the back and peeled out of there, not caring about the dust cloud I was kicking up. It wasn't until I was miles away, the forest, nothing but a green smudge in my rearview mirror, that I allowed myself to relax. I had made it. I had survived. But as the fear faded, excitement began to take its place. I had seen something extraordinary, something that could rewrite our understanding of the natural world. And I had proof. As soon as I had cell service, I called my editor. "Mark," I said, my voice hoarse from exhaustion and emotion, "you're not going to believe what I've got." The photos caused a sensation, of course. Scientists, cryptozoologists, and curiosity seekers descended on the forest. But despite extensive searches, no one ever found concrete evidence of the creature I encountered. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I still wake up in a cold sweat, the echo of that unearthly shriek ringing in my ears. I've never gone back to those woods, and I never will. Some mysteries, I've learned, are better left unsolved. But I'll never forget the night I became the quarry, hunted by something that shouldn't exist. It changed me, reminded me that in the grand scheme of things, humans are not always the apex predator. And somewhere out there in the depths of the forest, something is watching, waiting, reminding us that there are still wild places in the world where we are not in control. The first scratch in the wall was so faint I almost missed it. But as I traced my fingers over the rough surface, a chill ran down my spine. Something was in the walls of this old cabin, something alive and moving. And as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room. I realized with growing horror that I was trapped here with whatever it was. My name's Daniel, and I've always been a bit of a loner. So when I inherited my great-uncle's cabin in the woods, it seemed like the perfect opportunity for some peace and quiet. I'd been feeling burnt out from my job in the city, and the idea of spending a few weeks surrounded by nature was incredibly appealing. The cabin was exactly as I remembered it from childhood visits, a small rustic structure nestled in a clearing, miles from the nearest neighbor. As I pulled up in my rental car, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. I could almost smell Great Uncle Frank's pipe tobacco and hear his deep, rumbling laugh. The first few days were blissful. I hiked during the day, marveling at the lush forest and the crystal-clear streams. In the evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a book, listening to the chorus of crickets and watching the fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. It was on the fourth night that I first heard it, a soft scratching sound coming from inside the walls. At first, I dismissed it as mice. The cabin was old, after all, and it wasn't surprising that some critters might have made their home in it. But as I lay in bed that night, the scratching grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to be moving, traveling from one wall to another. This was no mouse. The next morning, I examined the walls carefully. That's when I found the first scratch marks, long, deep gouges in the wooden panels. They were too big to be from any rodent I knew of. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a raccoon that had somehow gotten into the walls. But deep down, I knew that didn't fit. The scratches were too deliberate, too purposeful. As the day wore on, I found myself jumping at every creak and groan of the old cabin. The scratching had stopped, but the silence felt oppressive, like the calm before a storm. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, every nerve on high alert, waiting for the sound to start again. When it did, it was different. Not just scratching now, but a soft thudding, like something heavy moving through the walls. I got up, grabbing a flashlight from the bedside table. My hands were shaking as I shone the beam along the walls. The scratching seemed to be coming from behind the old fireplace. As I approached, the noise stopped abruptly. I stood there, heart pounding, straining my ears in the silence. Then I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold, a low, guttural growl coming from inside the wall. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. This was no animal, at least, no animal I'd ever encountered. I spent the rest of the night huddled on the couch, jumping at every sound. As soon as the first light of dawn broke, I was in my car, driving towards town. The local diner was just opening when I arrived. I must have looked a sight, pale, disheveled, with dark circles under my eyes. The waitress, a kindly older woman named Betty, took one look at me and brought over a strong cup of coffee. "You all right, honey?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed nervously. "Not a ghost," I said. "But something. I'm staying at my uncle's old cabin, and there's something in the walls." Betty's expression changed, a flicker of, was that fear? "Frank's old place?" she asked. "Up on Willow Creek Road." I nodded, surprised. "You knew my uncle?" She sighed, glancing around the empty diner before sliding into the booth across from me. "Everyone around here knew Frank," she said, "and everyone knows about that cabin." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" Betty leaned in, lowering her voice. "There's always been stories about that place. Even before your uncle bought it. People say it's not right. That there's something living in the walls. Something that's been there for a long, long time." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What kind of something?" She shook her head. "Nobody knows for sure. Some say it's a spirit, angry at being disturbed. Others think it's some kind of creature, hibernating for years at a time. Your uncle, he never believed the stories. Said it was just superstition." I thought about the scratches, the growl I'd heard. "It's real," I said. "Whatever it is, it's real." Betty reached out, patting my hand. "Listen, honey, if I were you, I'd pack up and leave. Some things, it's better not to mess with." But I couldn't just leave. The cabin was mine now, my responsibility. And a part of me, the part that had always been drawn to mysteries and the unknown, wanted to know what was hiding in those walls. I spent the day in town, researching the cabin's history and buying supplies, including a sturdy axe. As the sun began to set, I steeled myself and drove back up to the cabin. The scratching started as soon as night fell, but this time, I was prepared, or so I thought. I approached the wall where the sound was loudest, axe in hand. With a deep breath, I swung, the blade biting into the old wood. The scratching stopped abruptly. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, a roar that shook the very foundations of the cabin. The wall in front of me bulged outward, wood splintering. I stumbled back, raising the axe defensively. But I wasn't prepared for what emerged. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Vaguely humanoid, but covered in thick, matted fur. Its eyes glowed in the dim light, fixed on me with an intelligence that was terrifyingly unnatural. For a moment, we stared at each other, frozen in mutual shock. Then it lunged. I swung the axe wildly, feeling it connect with something solid. The creature howled, a sound of pain and rage that sent me scrambling towards the door, but it was faster. A clawed hand grabbed my ankle, pulling me down. I kicked out, my foot connecting with its face. It let go, and I scrambled to my feet, running for the car. I could hear it behind me, its heavy breathing and the thud of its footsteps spurring me on. I reached the car, fumbling with the keys. Just as I got the door open, it slammed into me from behind. We went down in a tangle of limbs, rolling across the forest floor. Its face was inches from mine, hot breath reeking of decay. I could see my terrified reflection in its glowing eyes. In desperation, I grabbed a rock from the ground and smashed it against the creature's head. It reared back, momentarily stunned. I took my chance, scrambling into the car and locking the doors. The engine roared to life, and I floored it, tires spinning on the dirt road. In the rearview mirror, I could see the creature standing in the middle of the road, watching me drive away. Its howl of frustration followed me all the way down the mountain. I didn't stop driving until I reached the city limits. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I never went back to the cabin. I sold it, at a loss, to a developer who planned to tear it down. I didn't tell him about what lived in the walls. Maybe I should have, but who would have believed me? Sometimes, late at night, I still wake up in a cold sweat, the echo of that unearthly howl ringing in my ears. I'll never forget those glowing eyes, that ancient alien intelligence. And I can't help but wonder if there was one of those creatures. Could there be more? How long have they been hiding in the walls of old houses, in the dark places we never think to look? One thing's for certain. I'll never look at an old cabin in the woods the same way again. Because now I know that sometimes the walls really do have eyes, and claws, and an appetite for unsuspecting visitors. The neon sign flickered ominously as I pulled into the parking lot of the Starlight Motel. Little did I know that checking in for the night would be the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt me for years to come. Sometimes, the most terrifying monsters aren't supernatural beings, but the seemingly ordinary people we encounter in our daily lives. My name's Sarah, and I've always been a bit of a restless soul. I was on a cross-country road trip, trying to find myself or whatever it is that people say they're doing when they don't know what to do with their lives. It was late, I was exhausted, and the Starlight Motel was the first place I'd seen in miles that looked like it might have a vacant room. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a couple of beat-up trucks and my own dusty sedan. As I killed the engine, I noticed a curtain twitching in the office window. Someone had been watching me pull in. The office bell jangled as I pushed open the door. Behind the counter stood a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite, all hard angles and cold eyes. His name tag read, Earl. "Need a room?" I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Earl's eyes roamed over me in a way that made my skin crawl. "Just you?" he asked, his voice raspy like he'd swallowed gravel. I nodded, suddenly wishing I wasn't alone. "Got a single on the end. $30, cash only." As I counted out the bills, I could feel Earl's eyes on me. When I looked up, he was smiling. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Enjoy your stay," he said, handing me a key attached to a plastic fob shaped like a star. My room was at the far end of the motel, away from the office and the other occupied rooms. As I unlocked the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The room was about what you'd expect for $30 a night: a sagging double bed, a TV that looked older than me, and a bathroom that had seen better days. But it was a place to sleep, and that's all I needed. I was just about to collapse onto the bed when I noticed something odd. There was a small hole in the wall, about eye level, partially hidden behind a tacky landscape painting. I peered closer. It looked like it went right through to the next room. A chill ran down my spine. I quickly covered the hole with the painting, trying to convince myself it was just damage from a previous guest. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every creak and groan of the old building had me on edge, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there were eyes on me, even though I'd covered the hole. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke with a start in the early hours of the morning. Something had woken me, but I wasn't sure what. Then I heard it. A soft scratching sound coming from the wall. My heart began to race. I lay there, hardly daring to breathe, straining my ears in the darkness. The scratching continued, sometimes stopping for a few seconds before starting again. Suddenly, a shaft of light appeared on the wall. The painting was moving. I watched, paralyzed with fear, as the painting slowly shifted to one side. The hole in the wall was exposed, and pressed against it was an eye. I must have made a sound, a gasp or a whimper, because the eye suddenly widened, then disappeared. I heard hurried footsteps moving away. That got me moving. I leapt out of bed, throwing on my clothes and shoving my belongings into my bag. I had to get out of there. As I burst out of my room, I nearly collided with someone. It was Earl, standing right outside my door. "Everything all right, miss?" he asked, his voice far too calm for someone who'd just been caught peeping. "I'm leaving," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Now." Earl's face hardened. "Now. Don't be hasty. It's the middle of the night. Not safe for a young woman to be driving alone." He took a step towards me, and I noticed for the first time how big he was, how he seemed to block out the light from the parking lot. "Stay away from me," I warned, fumbling in my bag for my car keys. That's when I saw the glint of metal in his hand. A knife. "Can't let you leave, miss," Earl said, his voice almost regretful. "You've seen too much." I didn't think, I just reacted. I swung my bag at his face with all my strength. He staggered back, momentarily stunned, and I ran. I could hear him behind me, his heavy footsteps pounding on the concrete. I reached my car, my hand shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. Just as I wrenched the door open, a hand grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. Earl loomed over me, his face twisted with rage. "You shouldn't have done that," he growled. I saw the knife coming towards me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I brought my knee up hard, right between his legs. Earl doubled over with a grunt of pain, the knife clattering to the ground. I shoved him as hard as I could, sending him sprawling, and dove into my car. The engine roared to life, and I floored it, tires squealing as I peeled out of the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I could see Earl staggering to his feet, growing smaller as I sped away. I drove for hours, my heart pounding, jumping at every set of headlights I saw. It wasn't until the sun started to rise that I finally felt safe enough to pull over at a busy truck stop. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone to call the police. I told them everything, about the hole in the wall, Earl's behavior, the knife. They took my statement and assured me they'd investigate. As it turned out, I wasn't the first person to have a terrifying experience at the Starlight Motel. The police investigation uncovered a history of missing persons cases linked to the motel going back years. They found evidence that Earl had been spying on guests through holes in the walls, choosing his victims carefully. Those he thought wouldn't be missed: solo travelers, runaways, people down on their luck. In the end, they arrested Earl and his wife, who had been his accomplice. The full extent of their crimes was never made public, but the rumors were horrifying. I gave more statements, testified at the trial. It was a long and draining process, but I was determined to see justice done, not just for me, but for all of Earl's victims who couldn't speak for themselves. It's been years since that night at the Starlight Motel, but I still have nightmares sometimes. I see Earl's cold eyes, feel the terror of being hunted. I can't stay in motels anymore. The sight of those identical doors, those neon vacancy signs, it all brings it rushing back. But I've grown stronger too. I've learned to trust my instincts, to listen to that little voice that says something isn't right. And I've learned that sometimes the most ordinary-looking places and people can hide the darkest secrets. I still travel, still explore, but now I do it with my eyes wide open, always aware that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places. And every time I pass a rundown motel on a lonely stretch of highway, I say a silent prayer for those who might be trapped inside, fighting battles that no one knows about. Because the truth is, you never really know what's happening behind closed doors, or who might be watching from the other side of the wall. The moment I saw the ornate mask, something deep within me screamed danger. But surrounded by the laughter and music of the Halloween party, I pushed the feeling aside. If only I'd listened to that instinct. Because as the night wore on, I realized those masks weren't just hiding faces, they were concealing murderous intentions. My name's Alex, and I've always loved Halloween, the costumes, the atmosphere, the way reality seems to bend just a little on that one magical night. So when my friend Jen invited me to an exclusive Halloween bash at some rich guy's mansion, I jumped at the chance. It's going to be epic, Jen had gushed over the phone. This guy goes all out. And get this, it's a masquerade theme. Everyone has to wear a mask the whole night. Isn't that cool? It did sound cool, mysterious even. I spent weeks putting together the perfect costume. A steampunk-inspired outfit complete with a bronze and leather mask that covered the top half of my face. The night of the party, Jen picked me up in her beat-up Corolla. As we drove out of the city, the houses got bigger and farther apart. Finally, we turned down a long, tree-lined driveway. Holy shit, I breathed as the mansion came into view. It was massive, all Gothic spires and gargoyles, like something out of a horror movie. Jack-o'-lanterns lined the steps, their flickering light casting eerie shadows. Told you it was epic, Jen grinned, adjusting her feathered mask. Inside, the party was already in full swing. The foyer was packed with people in elaborate costumes, all wearing masks that ranged from simple dominoes to intricate full-face creations. Music pulsed from hidden speakers, and waiters in skeleton makeup circulated with trays of drinks and hors d'oeuvres. Wow, I said, taking it all in. Who did you say was throwing this party again? Jen shrugged. Friend of a friend. Come on, let's get a drink. We made our way to the bar, squeezing past a group of people in animal masks. As the bartender mixed our drinks, I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. I turned to see a tall figure in a red cloak and a white, beaked mask, like something a plague doctor would wear, staring at me. At least I thought they were staring. It was hard to tell with the mask. Creepy costume, I muttered to Jen. She followed my gaze. Oh yeah, I've seen a few of those around. I think they're part of the staff or something. Really adds to the atmosphere, right? I nodded, but couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. As the night went on, I started to notice more of the red-cloaked figures. They never spoke, never danced. They just watched. Every time I spotted one, that feeling of unease grew stronger. I was just about to suggest to Jen that we leave when the music suddenly cut out. The crowd fell silent as a man in an ornate golden mask stepped onto a small stage at one end of the room. "Welcome, honored guests," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "I hope you're enjoying the festivities, but now it's time for the main event." A murmur ran through the crowd. This hadn't been mentioned on the invitation. "As you may have noticed," the man continued, "some of our guests are wearing rather special masks." He gestured to one of the red-cloaked figures. "These individuals have been chosen for a very important role in tonight's entertainment." The man clapped his hands, and suddenly the red-cloaked figures were moving. They converged on the crowd, grabbing people seemingly at random. I watched in horror as they dragged struggling partygoers towards the exits. "What the hell?" Jen gasped beside me. Before I could respond, I felt a hand clamp down on my arm. I turned to see one of the red-cloaked figures looming over me. "No!" I yelled, trying to pull away. But their grip was like iron. All around, chaos had erupted. People were screaming, running, trying to fight off the masked assailants. But there were too many of them, and they moved with a cold efficiency that spoke of planning and practice. I lost sight of Jen in the mayhem. The figure in the red cloak was dragging me towards a door I hadn't noticed before, half hidden behind a tapestry. I fought every step of the way, but it was useless. As we neared the door, I heard the man in the golden mask speak again, his voice cutting through the panic. "Don't be afraid," he said, sounding almost amused. "Think of it as a game. A very high-stakes game of hide-and-seek. If you can evade our hunters until dawn, you win your freedom. If not, well, let's just say the consequences will be rather permanent." My blood ran cold as the implications of his words sank in. This wasn't a party. It was a hunt, and we were the prey. The red-cloaked figure shoved me through the door. I stumbled, nearly falling down a narrow flight of stairs. When I looked back, the door had already slammed shut. I was in some kind of cellar, dimly lit by flickering torches. Other partygoers were there too, all looking as terrified as I felt. Some were crying, others were pounding on the door we'd come through. "We have to get out of here," someone said, their voice shaking. "But how?" another responded. "They'll be guarding the exits." As if in answer, a section of the far wall ground open, revealing a dark passageway. "Your hunt begins now," the golden-masked man's voice echoed from hidden speakers. "You have until dawn. Good luck." For a moment, no one moved. Then, as if a spell had been broken, everyone rushed for the passage. I hesitated, wondering if it was a trap, but what choice did I have? I plunged into the darkness, the sounds of panicked breathing and hurried footsteps all around me. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes splitting into multiple routes. I tried to keep track of where I was going, but it was hopeless. This place was a maze. After what felt like hours of wandering, I found myself in a large, circular room. Passages led off in all directions, and in the center stood a fountain, dry and covered in cobwebs. I wasn't alone. A handful of other partygoers were there, all looking as lost and scared as I felt. One of them, a guy in a wolf mask, was examining the fountain. "I think I figured it out," he said as I approached. "This place, it's not just a basement. It's a whole network of tunnels and rooms, like a mini-city under the mansion." "But why?" a woman in a butterfly mask asked. "Why go to all this trouble?" Before anyone could answer, we heard it. Footsteps, coming from one of the passages, and with them, a sound that made my blood run cold, the soft metallic scrape of a blade being drawn. "Run!" someone yelled, and we scattered, each diving for a different passage. I ran blindly, my heart pounding in my ears. Behind me, I could hear screams echoing through the tunnels. I wanted to help, but the instinct for survival overrode everything else. I don't know how long I ran, or how many twists and turns I took. Eventually, I found myself in a small dead-end room. There was nowhere else to go. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced it down. I had to think. I looked around the room, desperate for anything that might help. That's when I noticed it. A small grate near the floor, just big enough for a person to squeeze through. I didn't hesitate. I pried the grate open and crawled inside. It was a tight fit, and the metal was cold against my skin. But I didn't care. Anything was better than being caught by those masked killers. I crawled through the duct for what felt like miles, every sound making me freeze in terror. Finally, I saw light ahead. I emerged into what looked like a garage, filled with expensive cars. And there, like a beacon of hope, was a door marked Exit. I ran for it, half expecting it to be locked. But it opened easily, and suddenly I was outside, the cool night air hitting my face. I didn't stop running until I reached the main road. Only then did I allow myself to collapse, gulping in great lungfuls of air. I had escaped. But as police sirens began to wail in the distance, I thought of all those still trapped in that underground maze. How many of them would see the dawn? The aftermath was a blur of police statements and news reports. The man behind it all, a wealthy recluse with a twisted sense of entertainment, was arrested. But many of his hunters were never caught. They never found Jen, or many of the others who went missing that night. The tunnels under the mansion went on for miles, they said. Some bodies might never be recovered. I still have nightmares about that night, about masks hiding inhuman eyes, about running through endless dark tunnels. But mostly, I dream about the ones I left behind, and I wonder, if I had been braver, could I have saved them? Halloween isn't fun for me anymore, because now I know that sometimes the monsters aren't just people in costumes. Sometimes they're all too real, and sometimes they win.